Hi everyone! Today we're going to draw and paint this bright juicy pomegranate using watercolor pencils and water brush pen. I'll show you a simple way to create shiny, dimensional pomegranate seeds without drawing each one individually, and how to use multiple shades to make the whole pomegranate look realistic and full of depth. Alright, let's get started. For this tutorial, you'll need watercolor paper, a water brush pen, watercolor pencils. The colors are shown on the screen, and a paper towel. Today we also use a white gel pen for the final details. You can find the full supply list in the description. And feel free to use any similar colors you have. First, I take a light red pencil and sketch a simple pomegranate slice, keeping the shape very easy and illustrative. Once the outline is ready, I gently color in the peel and then fill in the inside using the same light red shade. Next, I take a second red color, a slightly deeper, brownish red, and add it along the inner edge, keeping the outer peel a little brighter and more red. For the lighter center part, I use a yellow pencil. I keep the very middle lighter to create a natural highlight. Now we can activate the watercolor pencil with water. I start with the lightest area inside the pomegranate, keeping the center bright, and I softly blend the edge where the yellow meets the red, so the transition looks smooth. Then I move to the peel and activate the pigment with water, creating a bold watercolor look. Next, I activate the seeds the same way, gently blending the color inside. Alright, our pomegranate is completely dry, so let's move on to the second layer. I lightly wet the top and the left side of the peel. From here on, we're working on wet, applying the pencil right onto the damp paper. Now I add a deeper, richer pomegranate burgundy shade to the inner part of the peel. Then I gently blend it out, connecting it with the first layer and creating a smooth transition from dark to light. I also keep softening the edge where the peel meets the inside that red to yellow area to maintain a soft blend and add more dimension. And while the surface is still wet, I add one more shade, a cooler reddish purple tone. This step is optional, but I love adding multiple tones to make the pomegranate look more vibrant and alive. I repeat the same steps on the other side of the peel. Once the peel is done, we move on to the seeds. I wet the areas I need, then start with the burgundy shade. I add small curved strokes right onto the wet surface and then gently soften the with a clean damp brush. After that, I add the cooler reddish purple shade the same way, again on wet. Here's a quick tip. If the paper starts drying, you don't have to re-wet the area. Instead, you can slightly wet the tip of your pencil and apply the color as a second layer. Then blend it out with a clean damp brush. While this one dries, let's move on to the whole pomegranate. Alright, let's start with the outline. I'm using the same light red pencil and I'm working on dry. I also mark a few highlight areas that I want to keep bright, so we won't color over those. Then I fill in the entirety with the same light red pencil, making sure to leave the highlights untouched. Next, I add a little bit of yellow in a few spots to make the peel look more interesting. After that, I take a brownish red shade and add it mostly to the shadow areas to create more depth and dimension. Now let's activate the pencil with water. I start from the lightest area and gently work my way across the shape, blending the strokes and connecting all the shades together. I'm doing this slowly and carefully, keeping the transition smooth from light to more saturated and from light to dark. And now we'll let the pomegranate dry completely, and then we'll come back into the deepen the darker areas. For that, I lightly re-wet the surface and working on wet. I start adding a richer pomegranate shade in a few spots to make it look more saturated and dimensional. Then I blend it out with my brush, creating a soft transition from dark to light. I do the same with the darkest shade, a reddish purple. I add it into the deepest shadow areas and blend it out. On the top part of the pomegranate, I apply this shade a bit more boldly, right away. While the paper is still wet, you can also lift a few highlights. I use a clean damp brush to gently lift a little bit of pigment and then wipe the brush on a paper towel. I also want to add a cast shadow. This step is optional, but it makes the pomegranate look more grounded and expressive. I take a blue pencil and draw a simple shadow underneath, then activate it with water. While it's still wet, I deepen the shadow right underneath and blend it outward for a soft fade. Then I add a tiny touch of red along the edge to create a subtle reflected glow and gently soften it with water. And now we'll move on to the final step, adding details with a white gel pen. This is where we add little highlights to make the pomegranate look more expressive and interesting. I start by adding a few tiny squiggles and dots on the seeds. It's a really easy way to create that shiny, juicy look. And as you can see, it's super simple. You don't need to draw every single seed one by one. It's a more simplified, stylized approach, but it still looks really effective. Next, I add a few details to the peel. Just some tiny dots, short lines, and little strokes here and there. I also lightly outline the edges to give it that glossy, dimensional look. Then I move on to the second pomegranate and do the same thing, adding a few highlights to make it pop. If your gel pen highlight turns out too bright, the shape looks weird, or it just doesn't feel right, don't worry. It's really easy to fix. Just take your water brush and a little water and gently soften it. And that's it. Our pomegranates are finished. This was a simple but really fun way to paint them with watercolor pencils. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and found it helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more watercolor pencil tutorials. See you next time.